But I want to take you back live now to the Sandton Convention Centre here in Johannesburg, where that conference is taking place. And business presenter Devin Murrigan is there for the entire day. Devin, good morning to you. As we discuss the speech which has just finished, two things spring to mind. One, the President saying that investors are going to be spoilt for choice. The other were the closing words of his speech saying, from contact to contract. So critical that this isn't a talk shop. He said it wasn't, but the people in the room have got to engage with each other, and then that invitation for them to come up onto the big stage to make the pledge. So by and large, a very positive speech, I imagine. How is it being received? You're standing by with the chief economist of Stanlib, Kevin Lings.
Yes, indeed I am, Jeremy. And of course, he was hoping to be convincing today by the reaction from the crowd, I suppose he was. And you said it right there, changing contact to contract, making sure that the businesses' pledges translate into jobs, translate into making this anemic economy actually go the other way around. Let's try very quickly now, dive straight into Kevin Lings, Stanlib chief economist. Kevin, we often talk to you about our employment numbers, about our weak anemic growth. And of course, this is the reason we have the President on the podium today. Were you convinced?
Well, look, I think the intention is very good. Obviously, the focus, I think, is in the right areas. Things like deregulating South African business or making it easier to do business. The focus on encouraging tourism. The focus on improvement in manufacturing, particularly in the motor industry. That seems to get some investment. Focus in the mining sector. So I think all of that is the right intention. I think the President was fairly convincing in terms of what he intends to do. The difficulty remains the same, and that is about implementation. We've had many of these promises in the past, and obviously the country struggled to implement. We've got two other constraints. The one is obviously energy, and it's difficult to move forward with many of these investment projects until you've got sufficient and consistent energy supply. The second is clearly the fiscal situation. In order to make this effective, government has to have a decent balance sheet. It requires government to spend money. Clearly, government doesn't quite have that, so it's going to have to turn more and more to the private sector. I was hoping for a bit more in terms of detail around private-public partnerships. I do think that's the route for South Africa. So I would give it a good score in terms of intention, saying the right sorts of policies, but it's about lifting the constraints and implementing the policies.
Of course, in a moment's time, perhaps in the next hour or two, we will hear about the actual new pledges. Hopefully they knew. But what was interesting at the start of the speech is that you had the Trade and Industry Minister, Ibrahim Patel, showing us the videos of those companies who made enormous pledges last year, saying that, hey guys, take a look on your screens, those factories are coming up. A lot of them, not all, not majority, are in implementation phase. That was a strategy that I think was very much needed here, wasn't it?
Very much so. So I think that was very effective to specifically pull out key investments and to show that a lot of this money that was pledged is being put to good work. And I would assume that many of those projects will continue on and others will be added to it. And hopefully that starts to create a momentum. When you look at those projects in the context of the South African economy, they remain fairly small. So obviously in terms of jobs and growth, they're not making a huge difference. The question is, can you build on that momentum? My suspicion is you'll get more announcements, more positive announcements, but there will be an underlying degree of caution to that until we can lift some of these constraints, and I would signal energy and electricity as key to that. So to me, the attendance here is positive. The fact that you've got a lot of foreign investors attending, the fact that you've got a BRICS representation, a huge delegation from China, the US, all of that is very encouraging. It's about trying to build on the momentum and some of the successes.
Kevin, what do you say to that unemployed person sitting at home watching the President give us that address and remind us, for that matter, that the stats as far as unemployment is concerned is not really reflecting the pledges we saw last year and the factories that came up this year. Neither is the business confidence number. So we have a bit of a disjuncture on the pledges we are seeing and the stats of unemployment, business confidence, consumer confidence when we read the numbers. Why is there a non-alignment?
So if you look at that, that's exactly right. The data is telling us this economy is growing at 0.5%. Unemployment rate is at pretty much a record level. Obviously inequality, all of those problems remain. Yet you listen to this type of conference would suggest that we're making significant progress. The difference is the the scale of the implementation. In other words, we have had some successes, and this conference between last year and now, has delivered some important gains. But it's not at a level, it's not at a quantum that is sufficient to make a visible difference just yet. And that's why I think the President did highlight that it's a 5-year strategy. You've got to build on these successes, and over a medium term, perhaps you can then start to have a difference in the overall macro numbers. This is a good start, and last year you would say was a good start, but you've got to build on it. My view is that you've got to add to this on a constant basis. You've got to fulfill the ease of doing business. If you look at the data, we've gone backwards in terms of the score on the ease of doing business. The President talked about website to make it much easier to register business. All of those things you've got to keep at it, and then hopefully we make a big enough difference so that the person who's unemployed starts to gain some hope. I think at the moment, if you're unemployed, you're fairly desperate, you've lacked conviction that you're going to see any sort of job gains. It's about holding on, keeping at it, and trying to raise that potential.
Kevin Lings, Chief Economist at Stanlib, thanks very much indeed for talking to us. We'll follow the next few sessions now, Jeremy. It's going to be about really looking at those pledges, and South Africa is now putting its case forward for investment, if you like. That's the plenary that's happening at the moment. We'll keep you updated on that.